when did you first realize with your parents, because in a way it was both of them, wasn't it, that there was some dark secret?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I can't remember which presenter commented earlier. I think it was Françoise about, you know, where does memory lie? You know, before language, before any capacity to sort of think about or understand anything, there is the body. So I was told that I was born angry. My mother's description of me was that I was born angry. So, you know, what was that about? So I had internalized in utero, I believe, a huge amount of the trauma that was in my DNA. Now, this was manifested overtly. There was clearly something very wrong. There were many visual signifiers, but there was no language or explanation attached to it. What was easier to kind of speak about or think about was that Maya seemed to be a problem. There was no getting away from the fact that I was the only person who had a mother with a number tattooed on her arm. So the first symbolic signifier that it was something very strange in my family was that my mother had, apparently, as young people would say at the time, why does your mother have her phone number on her arm? Well, I couldn't explain it. So it would be probably pre-10 years old. In response to such questions, I would say to my mother, why do you have a phone number on your arm? It didn't resemble our phone number, but it was a number. She would say, I'll tell you when you're older. And that time never came. Well, not before my own discoveries, accidental discoveries.
It's such a complex issue, isn't it? Because on one level, and I've had, as I said, I've been fortunate enough to have friends from both the survivor generation and second generation. And in a way, I've seen it as almost a protection. Is it lying? When you've got a family background of such appalling trauma that almost beyond, because how on earth does the individual cope with that, let alone cope with parenting?
Yeah.
Because this is an issue that's often been said to me, we didn't know how to be parents.
Yes.
So on one level, some of these people who had good lives before the show, they had loving families, and then you had that appalling renting of society, and then they emerge, and as you said before, many people wouldn't listen. Nobody really wanted to listen. And then you're in a situation where you do marry, you do have children. How are you going to shield those children? What do you tell them? When do you tell them? I have a friend who actually sat her children in front of a video on the show when they were 14 and 15. She thought that was the only way I could do it. You can imagine the trauma that caused. But and she said, oh, that was me. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, I think, you know, as you say, there were those that told and those that didn't. And absolutely, my mother's position was that she did not want to traumatize her children beyond all redemption by telling them they have no grandparents because they lie somewhere in a mass grave. So without any shadow of a doubt, my mother's motivation in not telling, although had she been asked at the critical moment,
yes,
who knows what might have been different. By the time I was born in 1958,
Yeah.
She had settled into, in part, a dissociative state, but also a survival state. She was building, did a very important new life, which of course was the task of those that survived. So what is very strange is I didn't speak my parents' language, literally or metaphorically. My parents' first language is German, and my parents spoke German to each other. Now, of course, children are sponges for language. I didn't absorb it. And I have quite a good ear for language. I didn't absorb it. Only certain words. The second language was music, because they were professional musicians. So German, the culture of Germany, of music and culture, and Goethe and Schiller, and all of these wonderful things were ingrained, yet not part of my life. So I felt excluded from something that I didn't even know that I was being excluded from.
So you're a double outsider in that way, aren't you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You said something that really fascinated me, because I've heard this from other children of survivors, and I know there's research being done in certain parts of the world. Do you think this kind of trauma, you said it's almost, you're almost saying it's genetic?
Absolutely. I mean, there cannot be, I mean, of course, epigenetically, great advances have been made. And I remember a few years ago when the research came out of Canada, I think originally, I felt such relief. Indeed, when the term transgenerational trauma appeared, I felt such relief, because you know, there were no words to describe this phenomena. And one of the things that I think developed in my own thinking and practice and as an individual was that I realized I was in a kind of impossible competition in relation to what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to suffer? And the implications of the hierarchy of suffering. I have no right to suffer, because quite literally, as was often said, nobody was about to murder me, and I had food. Now, unfortunately, I needed more than that. And this is a dynamic, I think, that many survivors have great difficulty in reconciling in terms of the actually rather ordinary needs of their children.
But you said there was love.
Without doubt. Fierce love.
But fierce love and fierce, and in a way, Maya, I see it almost as protection. Misplaced, perhaps, from everything you've said, but how do we protect our children? We hide the truth from them.